Hello, thanks for joining us on your channel of choice at this time, Africa Independent Television. Welcome to Focus Nigeria, your program that puts the searchlight on topical issues in the polity. My name is Benga. I'm really glad to be here this morning. And as I predicted yesterday, Monday turned out to be an action-packed day in the polity. First was the budget breakdown session, where the minister in charge of the process gave an insight into how the 2017 fiscal law will be implemented. For a start, a sum of 350 billion naira will be released immediately for capital projects, some of them already ongoing. Let's take a listen to the minister.
There is a social housing program for which we have provisioned 100 billion. Now this is supposed to be seed money as part of a fund. That fund, the aim of that fund is to be up to 1 trillion naira in size. And the fund is for social housing. That is affordable housing. Then I mentioned about the special economic zones, for which 46 billion has been provided. And that provision is not for government to do it alone, no. In each of these special economic zones, government will partner with the private sector. Then we also want to recapitalize the Bank for Industry and the Bank for Agriculture, because one of the things that people have complained about is that access to financing, that interest rates are too high. So we're supporting these specialized banks so that they can deliver single interest loans, particularly to small and medium-scale enterprises. We have the special intervention program, for which we are maintaining the 500 billion which we set aside in 2016. We are taking the whole rail extremely seriously. We're discussing with the Chinese, we're getting some Chinese facilities. As a start, we want to do Lagos, Kano, as well as Calabar, Lagos. We want to upgrade a number of our medical facilities to international standards so that Nigerians need not go outside Nigeria to get medical treatment. We also have money, 10.02 billion, for the power evacuation facility for the Kashimbila hydropower plant. We have over 65 roads and bridges construction and rehabilitation projects across all the geopolitical zones of the country.
You will have to, aggregate the spending by all the tiers of government, and then, be able to determine whether we are compliant or not.
All right, the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Senator Udoma, and the Director General of the Budget Office, Mr. Ben Akaboeze, both speaking at yesterday's breakdown of the 2017 budget. And from the executive, let's get to the courts. And it was another day of reckoning for former Benue State Governor Gabriel Suswan, who was docked on yet another charge of corruption and impoverishing his state to the tune of over 9 billion naira. Suswan, along with his commissioner for finance when he was in office, Onodachi Okolobia, and the accountant general of the state, Janet Aluga, were docked at the Federal High Court, Abuja, on a 32-count charge. They pleaded not guilty to the charges, and Justice Gabriel Kolawole granted them bail in a sum of 250 million naira each. The judge directed all the three defendants to be remanded in the Koje prison pending when they will perfect their bail conditions, and trial is to resume on October 10 this year. And at another Federal High Court, also in Abuja, Justice Okon Abang held that the trial of former National Public Secretary of the PDP, Chief Olisa Metu, should resume in earnest. This followed the dismissal of Metu's appeal at the Supreme Court, where he was challenging a no-case, where he was making a no-case submission. The Federal High Court also dismissed Metu's application seeking the release of his travel documents to enable him travel to the United Kingdom for medical treatment. Justice Okonaba consequently directed Metu's trial to resume this morning. So we keep that in view already. Metu has an application pending, and it is to call the former National Security Advisor, retired Colonel Sambo Dasuki, to testify in his favor. Now let's end the review on a political note, and the story is from Ekiti State. Now, not too long ago, Governor Ayo Fayose dropped a bombshell when he said he would be seeking a court backing on whether he can contest the governorship election due in the state next year. His belief is that he is qualified to contest because the Supreme Court had invalidated his impeachment on October 15, 2016, which truncated his first tenure in office. Well, for those who thought that this must be another joke from the ever-controversial Ekiti State Governor, now you need to go to the state to see the large billboards already proclaiming his 2018 continuity project. But yesterday, in Ado-Ekiti, the state capital, some would-be aspirants on the platform of the PDP, including Fayose's own deputy, Dr. Kolakpo Olushola, said they are shelving their governorship ambition, and instead they are supporting Fayose's bid for continuity. Okay, let's hear it from them first, and then I will tell you more about this unfolding drama.
Of the meeting, it is unanimously resolved as follows. 1, that the Supreme Court, in the case of APC versus PDP and others, resolved that the first tenure of Governor Peter Ayodele Fayose was unlawfully terminated in a civilian coup-like manner and hence deserves redress. 2, that in consideration of the above, we hereby urge and encourage Governor Peter Ayodele Fayose to seek a legal redress in a competent court of law to recover the aborted mandate, including allowing him to contest 2018 gubernatorial election, as the 2014 gubernatorial election and the subsequent swearing in is so far the only legally recognized mandate of the governor. Hence, he still enjoys a legal right to contest for a second term as a governor. 3, that pending the determination of this issue for the realization of the governor's mandate by the court, we, the undersigned, hereby suspend our gubernatorial aspirations.
Well, the undersigned includes the man who read the communique, that's the current deputy governor, 2 former deputy governors as well. I think both of them served also under Fayose in this first outing. Well, first, I'm happy that those 6 would-be aspirants led by the deputy governor are not only the PDP aspirants. There are still a sizable number of them, and among them, very politically savvy and much more politically sagacious politicians who will not be part of this political naivety. Now, this is also not to forget the APC and the crowd of aspirants already building up on that platform too. Well, for those aspirants, that's all I will say for them yet. But, I mean, for those profile aspirants, that's what I mean, who are just, if you ask me, jeopardizing their chances, because this continuity project is not a cut and dry issue yet. First, it does not have any legal basis in law, and it also does not have a precedence in the polity. And by the time the issue is sorted out, the ship would probably have left the harbor. There will be little time left for them to prepare for what should be an interesting race. And Fayose himself will probably have other things on his mind, you know what I mean, other than who among his coterie of loyalists he should anoint. But as for Fayose's claim itself, let's get back to that. I'm still wondering how this claim will be formulated in court, really. Will Fayose be simply asking for the 8 months or so that he was denied when he was impeached in 2006? Yeah, October 2006. Or will he be asking for a fresh 4-year tenure? If it's the first option, when will that 8 months start running? Will it be immediately after he completes his current tenure, or a fresh election will be conducted in which he will be asking for another 4 years, or he simply resumes a tenure that has been interrupted by the reign of 2 other persons since then, Segun Oni and Kayode Fayemi? I mean, how will his first tenure and the current tenure be computed in law without giving the impression that his second tenure actually overshot the 4 years constitutionally stipulated period allowed by the Constitution? But by far the most important, Fayose should do well by getting his lawyers to get and read very well, line by line, the decisions of the Supreme Court in many cases dealing with how to compute or interpret the tenure of an elected executive. But for the little I know, the emphasis is on oath-taking and not the tenure itself. In other words, a person could be elected for a tenure of 4 years, but spend less than 4 years as in Fayose's first tenure, and yet it will be counted for the purposes of the Constitution. It will be counted as a tenure. And when the Supreme Court declared that he was improperly impeached, was it purely to enable Fayose seek for the unspent part of his tenure, or simply remove the ignominy of being impeached and therefore not qualified to seek the office again when he did in 2014, as claimed by his opponent in that election petition? Serious legal questions to be answered. In other words, was the Supreme Court pronouncement simply to make Fayose qualify for the election of 2014 and no more than that? No doubt an interesting development here. And the earlier Fayose settles this issue, the better for those loyalists of his who are investing their own political future in that of a man who may have no time to think of them when the die is cast. But let's leave that and set the tone for our discussions this morning. I have 2 lawyers who will be joining me shortly, Barrister Ilemona Onoja and Ofoneme Eno are both Abuja-based legal practitioners. They will be joining me as we take up the controversies thrown up by last week's acquittal of Senate President Bukola Saraki by the Code of Conduct Tribunal. How sound is the ruling of the Code of Conduct Tribunal? How valid or how fatal are the discrepancies in the prosecutor's case as pointed out by the 2-man tribunal? This is one judgment that has generated a lot of interest since last week, and we have a lot of talking points, including how the Code of Conduct Tribunal itself is composed. We'll be looking at all of these issues shortly.
They see chaos and conflicts. We see community action for good governance. They see poverty and want. We see perseverance and the will to go on. They see economic law. We see the ingenuity and creative spirit of our people. We are AIT News, fresh, authentic views of Africa. How would you rather see the world? AIT News, all sides, all the time.
If you're just joining us, a very warm welcome to you. We are starting the discussions now because my guests are here. 2 of them are lawyers, like I said. Barrister Ofoneme Eno is joining us for these discussions. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Ilemona Onoja is also a lawyer based here in Abuja. He's also a public affairs commentator. Good to see you too.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. The Code of Conduct Tribunal finally ended, has the most political case in the last couple of years. This Saraki trial, no doubt, will be at the center, or is at the center of the current not too cordial relationship between the executive and the legislature. Even now that the tribunal has concluded this trial, it has not completely settled the matter. We hear that the Office of the Attorney General is dissatisfied with the position of the tribunal, and an appeal may just be ready any moment from now. But let's look at how it all started in 2015. Was the arraignment of Saraki at the time the government did, was it necessary at all? Because here was a charge predicated on events that took place whilst he was governor of Kwara State. After he served out his tenure, he had been senator for 4 years. And then he had been re-elected for senator again before all of this started.
Oh, thank you very much, Benga. First of all, I would like to ask, is his arraignment, was it time barred? My answer is no.
Okay.
Did it come later than usual? Maybe. There's a school of thought that believes that he shouldn't have been arraigned in the first place. There's also a school of thought that believes that the arraignment of the Senate president was political, has some political undertones, considering the relationship between the legislature and the executive as at that time. But if you look at the charges, you know, one could safely say that maybe in trying to build a case against the then governor of Kwara State, in terms of asset declaration, maybe it took longer than usual. But I will not completely say that it shouldn't have been brought in the first place. He held a public office. He filled the Code of Conduct form, and just like every other public office holder since 1999, he's the CCT, the Code of Conduct Tribunal, is entitled to look at his form before and after the expiration of his tenure.
So he was answerable to the law.
Yes, he was by the statutes establishing the Code of Conduct Bureau, and by the inherent powers of the Code of Conduct Tribunal. It is safe to say that he was arraigned in line with the existing laws, irrespective of the length of time it took for that arraignment to take place, and also irrespective of the political undertones.
Okay.
One could
I was
drive
also
in.
saying, what about the political climate of that time?
Was
that arraignment necessary simply because he had gone against the powers that be in quotes,
well,
within his own political party?
Speaking as a lawyer, I would say that it was well within the rights of the Code of Conduct Tribunal to arraign him at that time. But you see, when we look at the laws vis-a-vis public affairs, one could deduce that maybe, just maybe, there was some that frustrating relationship must have necessitated, but I would not really toe that line, because speaking as a lawyer, I would say that the Code of Conduct Tribunal and the prosecuting bodies that arraigned him acted within the confines of the law.
I don't agree.
Ilemona.
I completely don't agree.
Okay.
Because fundamentally, one of the first things I was taught in law school is that justice must not only be done, justice must be seen to be done. One. Two, I was also taught, you know, fundamentally, the principles, our judicial system, our system of laws, is predicated on the principles of what you call it now, of judicial precedent.
Okay.
Right? The ingredients of Saraki's case, of the Senate President's case, were the same thing as the ingredients of Chief Bola Tinubu's case. There's no difference. Fundamentally, there's no difference.
No. But even as a lawyer, you will know that there are no two cases that are exactly the same thing.
It was still the same.
At least the dates will be different. And that the dates could actually make all the difference.
I used my word. I chose my words carefully. I said the ingredients.
Yeah, the ingredients will also include the time of commission of crime.
It was the same thing. It's the same charge of under declaration of assets or false declaration of assets. Now, the Code of Conduct Tribunal in Bola Tinubu's case upheld the proviso to Section 3D of the Code of Conduct Bureau and Tribunal Act, which said that if there is any issue of a false declaration of assets, you know, the person who declared assets, the declarant, should be given, well, if the declarant writes a written admission, he would, then no reference of that matter to the Code of Conduct Tribunal would be necessary. In other words, no prosecution would be necessary if he gives a written declaration, a written admission. And
now, so that's also an issue that we also need to talk about. It's one of the issues that I've noted, whether that works right for the law. For example, we can extend it to other crimes. It's as simple as saying, if you arrest an armed robber and you ask him, Mr. Man, are you the one that committed this armed robbery at so place or so this date? And if he says, yes, I am, then that matter should end.
What does the law? It comes down to what the law says regarding armed robbery.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Whether that provision is a public interest in the first place.
Well, you're talking about law as it ought to be. let's just talk about the law as it is.
Yes, we'll
The
look
law
at
as
both,
it is.
both as it is and as it ought to be.
The law as it is
Yes.
places an onus that Saraki should have been notified of discrepancies in his asset declaration forms, and that he should have been given the opportunity to admit thereto or not. That was one of the fundamental fulcrums of his defense.
And that had been interpreted by the same tribunal.
Interpreted by the same tribunal, by the same judge, and had been used to acquit someone else. Now, the question I ask fundamentally is this: justice must be seen to be done. Why should it be good for the goose and not be good for the gander? Ab initio, with the fact that there was a judicial pronouncement from that same court, led by that same judge, ab initio, the charges shouldn't have been brought. Ab initio.
Or should have been dismissed. Not
The
that
charges
it should have been dismissed.
It should have been
not
dismissed
been brought.
immediately. Now we might reach the arguments as to whether or not this is in public interest. And if we reach the conclusion that this is not in the public interest, what we should be doing is pressuring our lawmakers to modify the law.
I'll come back to that shortly.
Okay.
But this issue was canvassed at the time the trial started.
Yes.
It was one of the issues taken up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled against the Senate President.
Yes.
So it would seem as if that point of law didn't gel, so to say.
Thank you very much.
But again, looking at it critically, isn't this allowing the same tribunal to blow hot and blow cold on the same principle of law? Because here, let us separate the facts of the two cases, the Tinubu case and the Saraki case. But let's look at the principle of law, which is the provision that Barrister Ilemona Onoja.
Thank you very much.
Isn't it allowing the tribunal to blow hot on one case, blow cold on one case and blow hot on another case?
Well, I'll just take two examples here. One, the tried principle in law that no two cases are the same. That's one. Then two, I'll borrow my colleague's opinion here that justice must not only be done, but seen to be done. Manifestly seen to be done. Now, going before the tribunal, even though there is an admission, let's just presume that another public officer is found in this particular circumstance again, and such a person is called before the Code of Conduct Tribunal, and he makes those admissions. If that person is not passing through the same procedural process to establish either his admission of guilt or otherwise, he may come out and declare that he made those admissions on circumstances that were not favorable to him at that particular time. So justice being seen to be done is despite admission or not, such a public individual should pass through the process of trial before.
Just for the fun of it?
It has to be seen to be done.
At what point would that trial then terminate? Because in Tinubu's case,
yes,
the case didn't proceed to full trial. He was arraigned, he raised that preliminary point of
and it was dismissed.
Yes. And the case was dismissed. The tribunal didn't proceed to the merit of the case. But in this second case, Saraki was brought to the tribunal.
Yes.
He raised that same preliminary point of view.
And it was overruled.
And it was overruled.
Yes.
And he went up to Supreme Court. And
yes.
the Supreme Court overruled him.
Yes.
That's the point I'm saying, that what is it that the Supreme Court saw? Unfortunately, the Supreme Court didn't have that same benefit it had in Saraki's case. It didn't have that benefit in Tinubu's case. Otherwise, we would have been able to say whether the Supreme Court was also following precedent.
You've answered my question. We didn't go up to the Supreme Court in Tinubu's case.
It didn't even get to court of
exactly. So, having gone to the Supreme Court, I think right now a precedent has been set under Saraki's case. So, whatever be the case, whichever public individual finds himself in these circumstances tomorrow and raises that point of law would have to contend with the precedent that had already been set by the Supreme Court.
Is the Supreme Court therefore saying that provision of the Code of Conduct Act is there for the fun of it? Because it is there in code letters, that the first thing you do is at the Code of Conduct Bureau. And if certain things happen, the case may actually not get to the tribunal, which is the second stage. In other words, if the public officer is confronted with the discrepancies in his Code of Conduct forms.
In his asset declaration.
In his asset declaration forms. And he admits to that discrepancy. That is the end of the case. That's the provision of that law.
I would not question the wisdom of the learned justices of the Supreme Court in the decision.
But
what I'm going to say here is that a precedent has been set, and it's rather unique that the person on whose behalf on whose case this precedent has been set happens to be the head of the lawmaking body of the Federation. So it behoves on this National Assembly to now look critically at the act establishing the Code of Conduct Bureau, which is within their powers to amend and see if this particular provision is ridiculous or not.
I will believe that.
Yeah,
even before.
Even before doing that,
has
the Supreme, because the Supreme Court is also not just a court of law, but it's also a policy court. Is it possible that ruling of the Supreme Court on the objection that went up to that court, can we assume that the Supreme Court was acting more like a policy court and it has seemingly corrected that untidy provision of the law? Because it's untidy, really. Provision of the Code of Conduct Act is untidy.
To be honest, right, I think the justices of the Supreme Court, and this is my personal opinion now, I think the justices of the Supreme Court, in doing that, acted not based on the letters of the law, but as a policy court, like you just said. I think to their minds, they said, well, they don't think this is right, and they don't think it is going to get amended. So they're going to give a declaration. My position is this, and with all due respect to the learned justices of the Supreme Court, if what is in the law had been applied, there's no basis for this trial in the first place. Because that section definitely places an onus on the CCB to bring the discrepancies to his notice and afford him the opportunity to admit or to refute. Now, that section, I think it's section 3, also says, without prejudice to what is provided for in this section, he can be tried in another court. So for the purposes of
another court, not the
it says it could be tried in a regular court.
Yeah, because if you interpret this provision, the tribunal, the bureau cannot refer anything to the tribunal once there is an admission. Once there's an admittance, the bureau has nothing to refer to the tribunal
at all.
And if the tribunal doesn't get anything from the bureau, the tribunal cannot proceed against a defendant.
Yes. Very straightforward.
But that person can be tried in another court.
Yes.
It can be tried purely with a violation of.
They will find that the
Nigerian police some other things. Something. But with the Supreme Court, can the Supreme Court decision substitute for this provision of the law?
Because
that law is there.
You made mention to the fact that the Supreme Court could also be a policy court. So it sent its message clearly that provision 3, section 3, subsection D of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, Code of Conduct Bureau Act, you understand, is mischievous and should be done away with.
It's not in the public interest.
Yes, it's not in the public interest. So
it brings you to the jurisprudential argument about the principles of separation of powers. Is the court our courts now lawmaking bodies? Because the letter of the law is there.
Isn't there that spirit there? The
letter of the law is there.
My colleague is aware. My colleague is aware that there's also the golden rule. My colleague is aware that there's also the golden rule of
interpretation.
Exactly.
If it's strict interpretation of a law, will create mischief. And here, I've already told you the mischief. It's like the police. It's like the police caught an armed robber. And then they confront that armed robber with the evidence and they admit.
You cannot use armed robbery as an example.
Okay,
and I will tell you what does the law say regarding armed robbery? It doesn't give anybody it doesn't give anybody the opportunity to make an admission. It doesn't say that
when a public officer infringes on asset declaration, is that a crime or not?
It is.
Exactly. So I'm looking at that as a crime and armed robbery as a crime.
No, they're two fundamentally different crimes. And we, again, go back to what I've repeatedly said. The CCB Act makes that provision. The laws that deal with armed robbery don't. It's a fundamental difference.
Was it right
So
for
we
that?
should-
Was it right for that provision to be there in the first
Well,
place?
law-
We are talking of public interest now. Was it right?
In the interest, well,
Does it defeat the essence of why you have asset declaration regime?
I'm thinking
Because if all I can do, as a public officer, I can as well infringe on the asset declaration regime. I can have 3 properties and declare 2. And then tomorrow I'm confronted with it.
And you admit.
And I simply admit that, oh, it was an oversight. I'm sorry.
now,
That ends it. If
Now-
you strictly interpret the law as it is now.
Let us now.
When I have
Let's
actually
move from
committed a
here.
crime.
Let's move from here. Now let's discuss some of the merits of this matter relating to whether or not assets were properly declared. Right? Some of the what was contended at the CCT
Yeah.
was that the Senate President failed to declare assets. Gave some of the assets, buildings, property, and all that.
Yeah.
But you see, there's no provision that, before I go there, he now came and said those assets were owned by companies. And he declared his interests in those companies.
What was his interest in those companies?
Shares. He declared that he owned shares in the companies. Now,
What amount of shares?
he declared that he owned shares in the companies. It varied.
Preponderance of shares.
It varied from company to company.
Such that he could actually be regarded as the owner of the
No,
company.
you have to. I mean, there's the principle of separate legal personalities.
Yeah, even the asset regime required that you declare such interest.
No, yes, he declared his interest in the shares. He declared his interest in the
those
companies.
in those
However, the CCT forms, the CCB forms, the asset declaration forms, do not require you to declare assets owned by those companies. That's a different issue altogether. So once he declares his interests, his shareholding in those companies, for all intents and purposes, he's complied with the law.
It's much more serious than that. There
No,
were
it is a
evidence
fundamental-
that money left accounts that he is so signatory to those companies for the purposes of those purchases.
I think he's being. I think
no,
it's not
hold
being
on.
fair
No.
with his
I
analysis.
actually don't want us
No.
to discuss
Yes,
those
because
nitty-gritties.
aside from what he mentioned,
It's the principle,
yes.
the takeaway for Nigeria and Nigerians in all of this that I actually want us to debate. I have pointed out one, which is that whether the Code of Conduct Tribunal and Code of Conduct Bureau Act is not due for a second look by our lawmakers.
Benga,
Whether the essence of that provision of Section 3 of the Act should stand in the light of what we are seeing now.
I'm absolutely with you when it comes to the fact that the Code of Conduct Bureau Act is in their need of amendment. It's quite a short legislation, and if you look at it perfectly well, very few attention is paid to procedural processes.
Exactly, we also get
in terms of the conduct of
the
tribunal,
and
yes.
the bureau.
What is being given pride of place is the constitution of the bureau itself, which by all intents and purposes is just a preliminary in such a law.
Their entitlements,
yes, and the entitlement and all that. So I think the National Assembly should take a step further by looking critically at this act, giving it substantial procedural powers, and then keep putting it in clear terms on how and what should be done when it comes to trial. Don't forget that these decisions from this tribunal goes straight to the Court of Appeal. So it could be safe to say that the Code of Conduct Tribunal has coordinate jurisdictions with the High Court, the state and federal High Court. It's a superior court of record. So we have to ensure that when you look at the High Court rules and the Federal High Court rules, and you look at the Code of Conduct Tribunal Act, you should see there should be some form of similarity in terms of procedure, just so that our public officers, when our public officers are being brought before this.
I think everybody agrees that we need to amend the Code of Conduct.
Yeah, and it's good that the Saraki case has actually tested the law to its limit.
To its limit. I think everybody agrees with that. Because fundamentally, like you said, where the tribunal is allowed to blow hot and cold on the same issues.
It is not right for public.
It isn't right. It isn't right. So I believe everybody agrees with that. However, again, that is within the realm.
I also personally believe that it would have been a bad precedent for, I don't know, without trying to also question the validity of the opinions of the Supreme Court. That is also on the issue of procedure. That so long as that law is there, that it will amount to a travesty of justice. It will amount to double standard, really, for the law to be applied in one case to favor a defendant, in this case to favor Bola Tinubu, and then for that same provision to be applied and disfavor another person simply because of the different circumstances. It would have been a travesty of justice.
I believe that. I believe that. We need to. I agree. But again, I must also state that is now within the realm of lawmaking. I believe this is where we all possess an obligation to put pressure on our respective lawmakers to ensure that they amend the act and they begin to include, procedural doctrine, make provisions for several other things that aren't there. And if in their wisdom they decide that that the proviso to Section 3D ought not to be there, then they remove it. Exactly. However, I'll go back to what I said before, it is there. And I think I have a fundamental disagreement with the refusal to uphold it. I have because, see, while we can make the puritanical argument of the law as it ought to be, while we can make that puritanical argument, we have to look at the law as is.
My worry really is if tomorrow another set of defendants are dragged before the tribunal and they raise this issue of procedure and they raise that and they anchor it on this Section 3 of that act, and you have a different set of personnel, different set of judicial officers at the tribunal, there's nothing stopping them from reasoning along the provision of the law and say, yes, you didn't follow the procedure, so there is no case before us.
That is the beauty of the law. Because
and if they do that, would they be showing disrespect to the
that's the beauty of the law. If you look at the Bukola Saraki case as a test scenario, you would see that the EFCC was giving testimonies before the Code of Conduct Tribunal, and you see, so one could raise an argument or one could raise a question: why did we have to go to the Code of Conduct Tribunal in the first place? If the EFCC
empowered to prosecute before the Code of Conduct Tribunal.
You understand? If the EFCC had done its painstaking investigations, I mean, there are regular courts of record that could have gone there. So where we've seen this, proviso in the CCB Act that may probably some public officers may hide under to escape prosecution for false asset declaration. Bearing in mind that this is a criminal offense, I think that the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission can painstakingly arrange its investigation in such a manner that these people could be arraigned before a regular court. If we are talking about anti-corruption without making the citizens of this country rely heavily on our laws to be able to save them from the antics of leaders who aren't supposed to be in some places in the first place, then where are we heading to? So beyond the technicalities in the CCB, we should look at the procedure, the laws of our country, and how it can actually make our leaders be accountable to the people. Be assured that if and when they don't, the long arm of the law can catch up with them.
What for me? I've been on your show several times.
Yeah.
And I have
discussing the issue of corruption.
This issue of corruption.
Yeah.
And several times I have raised the issue about the inability and the incompetence of prosecuting authorities.
We saw that displayed in this case.
This was a prosecutorial nightmare.
Yeah.
Every single one of their 4 witnesses contradicted themselves from the beginning to the end. Michael Wetkas, Ibrahim Amazu,
and the man from the bank as well.
Yes.
How could you rely on somebody from the bank as your star witness who was coming to tell the tribunal that all the documents
were burnt,
that he would rely on had all been burnt, and you still brought him as a star witness to come and present no document?
These for instance, Michael Wetkas said before the charges had been brought, Saraki had been interrogated, and then on cross-examination said no.
He said
Saraki,
it was a team.
He said it
was the report written by a team.
See, we need to go back to this thing. As long as we may wax hot and lyrical about the need to bring people to account, and I agree. But the place to do that is painstaking investigation that establishes guilt.
Yeah.
There was none here. There was absolutely none. As much as people want to go on and say this man was guilty, this man was guilty, Section 36 of the Constitution gives him the
He's presumed innocent.
Gives him the presumption of
and
innocence.
You have 100%
now
proof to do.
If you look at, and I have read the judgment, if you look at anybody who followed this case, once it came down to the trial, I mean, after all the pre-trial antics, once it came down to the trial, anybody who followed this case knew that there was no way he would have been found guilty. Absolutely no way. Now, when you say people said that he had, say for instance, one of these things about Amex, American Express
card.
Card. Yeah. When you say that, the witness in that particular issue, I think it was Ibrahim Amazu, says that they had no evidence to link Saraki to that account. So when we look at the nitty-gritty,
this was a case that was investigated.
When you look at the nitty-gritty when you look at the details of the trial, there's nothing upon which you want to establish his guilt. There's simply none. If you now look at it, I've heard Mr. Obla, Mr. Obono Obla, Okoye Obono Obla. I was here with him on the show.
Yeah, one of the editions that would discuss
say,
the
how nonsensical these judgments are nonsensical and they'll be appealed. Having read this judgment, this judgment will be upheld at the Court of Appeal. This judgment will be upheld at the Supreme Court, simply because the prosecution, as in several other cases that it is doing, that this government is handling at the moment, is showing a staggering amount of ineptitude, incompetence. And when you see these kind of things, it now begs the question: are these charges only being brought to harass political enemies? Because the fundamental ingredients which are required to establish guilt simply do not exist.
The way I see all of this is this is just one too many, where the prosecution of anti-corruption cases or corruption cases has suffered a lot of mishandling. It's like in most of the corruption charges, the prosecution's belief is that the burden of proof is on the accused person. They are no longer called accused person, on the defendant. Yes. But that's not what the law is. The burden of proof in any criminal charge is on the prosecution to establish the guilt of the accused.
Absolutely.
But that's not what we see in court. It's like the attempt is to change that maxim that you are guilty, go to court, come and establish your innocence.
All right. There's some people that are saying that the anti-corruption fight is suffering some challenges because corruption is fighting back. Now, my colleague here would...
Is there a consequence of corruption fighting back?
No, that's
prosecuting corruption not having the right ammunition?
I'm coming there. Now, people are saying corruption is fighting back, but my colleague and I would agree that based on the current state of our laws, it's quite difficult to establish, it's more difficult to establish a case against a defendant beyond all reasonable doubts than being on the defense side of the divide. Why? Because our laws, vis-a-vis the kind of the high level of corrupt practices that we have today, do not tally. Our laws is slow in response to things like electronic evidence, wire transfer, recorded messages, all those things that are being used today in advanced countries.
Yeah, crime has gone high.
Yes, while our laws exactly. So we are living in a situation where we have a 21st century crime syndicate, and then we are pursuing them with an 18th century set of laws.
Yeah,
so
but who do you blame for that?
Exactly. Now we've had from 1999. From 1999, we've had a National Assembly. It took a long time before the Evidence Act was even taken a step further to be reviewed in 2004. So it behoves on the National Assembly, first of all, to look at our laws critically and see how they can review them in line with today's reality. And also the executive, through the office of the Attorney General or the presidency, should also initiate bills that would be able to change our fundamental practice of criminal prosecution before we can have any headway. So beyond people saying that what we have today are media trials, and if there are times it could be frustrating on the part of the prosecution where you know that you have evidence to establish a prima facie case against an individual, but the laws would not allow you to. Some of those evidences cannot be admitted in court.
Yeah, but in this case of Saraki,
now
the prosecution has not even demonstrated
now,
it has the evidence.
I want to look at the.
If you are calling somebody from the bank, if you are calling somebody from the bank to come and prove that this man made so transactions
at the beginning
and there is no evidence of those transactions,
at the beginning of Saraki,
and you ask him and he tells you all those documents have been burnt.
At the beginning of Saraki's case, you made allusions to the fact that there was some political undertones. I don't want to assume that the timeline between the start of that case
was enough to burn those documents.
And the time which the judgment was passed, that so many other things didn't happen behind the scene that probably must have influenced the outcome of I won't make allusions to it, but I won't also go with the fact that some people are calling it a travesty of justice. No. I'm just saying that maybe there were some political undertones. There are some things that would have happened that maybe would have slowed down some form of
isn't that where you need like to borrow the expression of former President Obasanjo, isn't that where you need ogbonge lawyer? Ogbologbo lawyer.
No, but you see, last time I was here, we had a discussion about the budgeting and funding of the EFCC and our prosecutorial and investigation agencies. I remember saying here that the EFCC has spent almost 10 times more on office buildings than it has on legal services.
In the last 2 years. In personnel.
It has spent more.
This is scratching the surface. We are scratching the surface.
EFCC has spent somewhere around.
Yeah, but it's crucial. How do you prosecute an accused person? And that accused person was not cautioned, and he didn't volunteer a statement that you will bring to court that I caution this accused person. He volunteered a statement in English or in Yoruba or in whatever
language that he understands.
And this is the statement.
These are things that
there
were fundamental issues to this
and
matter.
In a criminal prosecution, that is the first document. That is the first document a prosecutor tenders.
He could never
of the accused person
have been. You didn't interrogate him. You didn't invite him.
He didn't volunteer
a statement. This trial was a complete charade. It was a sham. And the people who we need to in fact get to a point we need to get to the point where people who waste government time and resources like this should be adequately punished within.
But that's where all of us should be concerned. How do we make the system work? Because the problem, the truth is that we have problems, we have challenges in the system. This morning I was reading one of the papers. I think I brought it with me, and I quickly read the story and laughed. Senate begins action on corruption. And I flipped to that page to read the story. You know what they are trying to do? They are trying to enlarge the scope of the functions of the Public Petitions Committee of the Senate. To do what? To be able to receive petitions from the members of the public on corruption. And I read the story today. I said, okay, when this committee of the Senate has received these petitions about corruption, what is he expected to do with it? To go and investigate? Is that the function of the Senate? To go and prosecute after investigating? Is that the function of the Senate?
I think there's a misplaced priority here and a disconnect between what the functions of the legislature is and what the functions of the executive is in today's Nigeria, because we already have the office of the Attorney General saddled with the responsibility of prosecution. Now,
why are we not looking at the problem?
Yes, if we really want to strengthen it, the National Assembly has powers to, I mean, people have been talking about the separation of the office of the Attorney General and that of the Minister of Justice. Yeah. That is within the confines, those things are within the powers to do that. Yeah. There's a way and manner they can create an independent entity to fight corruption. Don't forget that President Obasanjo, on assumption in 1999, his first steps towards anti-corruption was the introduction of 2 bills, one creating the ICPC and one creating the EFCC. Those were fundamental, and today we could see the effect of those bodies in terms of the fight towards corruption. So if you have to merge these bodies, you have to ensure that our basic ground norm, our constitution, should be tailored in such a way that the bodies responsible for the fight against corruption should be independent, so to speak. Now, for the executive, for the legislature trying to usurp some powers and go into investigation, I think it's unnecessary. I think they have powers to strengthen our constitution. I think they are the ones that are closer to the people because they represent each and every federal constituency in this country.
That's correct. All right, Pastor Ilemona, your final comment as well.
Well, for me, I believe that
there's no way you look at this Saraki case. I think the man is off the hook
completely.
If the government appeals to the Court of Appeal, two things may happen. Either either the government wins, in which case we come back to the tribunal again for the case to start again on its merit. And then, of course, when you get back to that, fresh issues will raise. Can you ask the same tribunal that has already taken a position to continue the trial on the merit? The answer, of course, will be no. If you go to the Supreme Court, the same thing will happen. I think we should just look at how to strengthen our the institutions. Yes.
That we should just, again, like I've always said, we need to stop this thing where we believe that fighting an anti-corruption fight is coming out on the streets and shouting and having people arrested and arraigning and then conducting a media trial. It doesn't work. It makes absolutely no sense.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Omogbola and Bab CFR, the current democracy has been practiced in Nigeria seems to be more of a curse than blessing. What have we gained since 1999? Ademola says, CCB Act needs amendment. People can acquire crooked assets now and in the future declare it as omissions. Azuka Ikechi Harris says we should be mindful to ensure that the law isn't tinkered with for different individuals. Once that becomes norm, our judicial system dies. Omogbola again, our case in Nigeria is egregious. Every of our legal system allows for celebration of rogues and looters. We need an overhaul. Okolo Chukuneye, why can't federal government show enough commitment to fight corruption rather than just blaming the judiciary? We must fund investigation and prosecution well. Let's leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen. I've been joined in this morning's discussions by Barrister Ofonime Eno, is based here in Abuja. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And of course, Barrister Ilemona Onoja, also based here in Abuja. Thank you so much. That's Focus Nigeria this morning. Thank you for investing your time with us. We'll be back tomorrow. Do keep a day with us. Enjoy the rest of the day.